Halloween is just around the corner, which means I've started my horror book marathon where I read nothing but the best horror books out there. Now, starting this marathon is a book I've been eager to read for a very long time, but I saved it specifically for this video, for this marathon. And that book is The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Now, I won't simply review this book. I actually read another book, a second book, to compare it with and to see which of the two is the best in my opinion. Now, that second book I read is The Case Against Satan by Ray Russell. For those who've been following the channel since it first started, you guys know that this is actually the first horror book I read on this channel. One of my favorite, and I thought it was only fair to reread it just so that I can have the details and compare it with The Exorcist. Now, the reason why I'm comparing these two books is because the two books have a very similar plot. You know, they both deal with a young girl who's been possessed by a demon or the devil himself, and you have these priests who come and perform an exorcism on the girl. An interesting point to make is that The Case Against Satan was published before The Exorcist, almost a decade before, in 1962, whereas The Exorcist was published in 1971. Just kind of an interesting note I wanted to make. A difference between the two books is one came far before the other. To compare these two books, I'm using my grading system WEPIC, W being the writing style, E being ending, P being the plot, I how intriguing the book was to me throughout the book, and finally characters. But before I start comparing and talking about details, I do want to give you guys a spoiler alert. I'm going to be talking about very important details about the book. So if you haven't read the book, stop it there, read the books, come back, and don't forget to leave a comment. Let me know which one of the two you thought was the best horror book. Starting with writing, I'll admit, is a very difficult subject to talk about because it really comes down to my personal preference in terms of writing. You know, I like simplicity. I like a book that is easy to read. You read a book and you immediately know whether it's going to be an easy read or not. Some books are a little bit more difficult to read for me. For example, H.P. Lovecraft. We've already talked about that. Ray Russell and William Peter Blatty have a very similar writing style. They're not so different, but I found and I felt that Ray Russell's writing was a little bit easier to understand and go through. For that reason, I'm going to give this round to The Case Against Satan. Now, for ending, both of the endings did have a good ending. The priest did save the girl, but The Case Against Satan was a much brighter ending. You know, both the priest and the Bishop Crimmins, they survived. The only person that died at the end of that book was Mr. Garth, with which, of course, we all find out that he was not a very good person. So, very good ending, bright ending to that story. Whereas The Exorcist is a much darker ending. You have the priest, Father Karras, who sacrifices himself, jumps out the window to save the girl. And you also have Father Marin, who passed away too. He dies during the exorcism. So there is that. It's kind of a darker ending to the story. Something I did like about the Case Against Satan is the plot twist. You know, this whole time you think that the father was trying to help the girl, which he is, but he was trying to hide the past, hide what he did to the girl's mother, right? He actually killed the mother. And ultimately, I just felt like The Case Against Satan, the ending was just well put together. You know, you get the whole explanation, and Ray Russell took his time to kind of finish the story, whereas The Exorcist, in a way, it kind of felt rushed. And for that reason, I'm going to give ending this round to The Case Against Satan. Now, for plots, somewhat similar plots, like I said before. Something interesting about both of the stories is that you have a priest that is a psychiatrist and who don't really believe that there is a devil or a demon possessing the child. They both kind of veer towards science and psychology, and they're trying to understand it from that perspective rather than, believing that there is a demon or the devil inside the child, right? So I thought that was very interesting about both stories. Ultimately, with plot, you know, even though they're both similar, I felt that The Exorcist was a very, very long novel. I felt that The Case Against Satan is really a condensed version of The Exorcist. It's both very good, but again, I'm going to give this round to The Case Against Satan. Intriguing. Now, the scenes in The Exorcist where the exorcism is being performed, they're much more memorable. You know, it feels like an actual exorcism. Every time that the priest or anyone goes into the room where Regan is at, you feel that danger. You feel like this tension of the devil himself being in that room, and you feel scared for the priest. You feel scared for anyone who enters that room. You're on your at the edge of your seat every time they go inside that room, and they're trying to figure stuff out, and you're just like, oh, I wouldn't be in there if I were you. You know, so that's what made that book more interesting, more intriguing to me. Another point is the actual investigation that happens with Denning's death. You know, you have this investigator. I forgot the name of the investigator, to be honest, but he's trying to figure out who killed Dennings, and that kind of adds on to the whole intriguingness of the story, because you obviously don't want Susan to go to jail or people to think that she was the one who killed them. So there's that extra bit that kind of gives you intriguingness to the story. The Case Against Satan does have some of that. You know, the community is starting to find out about Father Gregory. They find out about his past, about his drinking. They hear these screams, and the community is starting to become aware of what's going on in the room where they were performing the exorcism. So you do have that tension there, but I felt that the exorcism was it was intriguing because of how severe it felt. So for that round, I'm going to give intriguing to The Exorcist. And finally, characters. I love all of the characters of each of these books. I love them so much. They felt authentic. But if you want to compare, for example, Susan and Regan, I felt that Regan had a deeper personality than Susan. I felt like you kind of almost felt bad for her when she was being possessed because of the way she acted around her mother. She was very lovey-dovey with her mother, gave her roses and all this stuff. So I felt that Regan was had a bigger personality than Susan in terms of characters. Another important character is Father Karras. You know, his mother died. You feel that sadness in him. You feel that tension within him. You know, he's losing his faith, and I felt that he was a much deeper character than both the bishop and Father Gregory in The Case Against Satan. For that reason, characters is going to The Exorcist. Well, all of that being said, you guys can see that The Case Against Satan won this battle. Both of them great books. Loved them. I love reading horror, and these are a great example of horror. It's October. Halloween's around the corner, like I said. If you guys want to read a good horror, these two books are the way to go. But that being said, I want to give a huge thanks to the authors of these stories. Phenomenal writing, phenomenal stories. And I also want to give a huge thanks to you guys for watching this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. And I'll see you next time I read a horror book for my horror book marathon.